Welcome to another episode of the Midnight Investigator, where we take another alternative look at moments in history. Okay, tonight's investigation is the legendary Davy Crockett, and the question we are investigating is, did Davy Crockett die at the Battle of the Alamo? When you hear the name Davy Crockett, what comes to mind? Well, for us, let's say older ones, probably a tough frontiersman in a coonskin cap, a hero who killed him a bear when he was only 3. That larger-than-life image was burned into our minds, especially in Walt Disney's TV series in the 1950s. The show was a massive hit, sparking a nationwide craze. Kids everywhere wore coonskin caps, and in 1955 alone, Crockett merchandise raked in an estimated $300 million. For a whole generation, he became the ultimate symbol of the rugged American spirit. Hollywood kept the legend going. John Wayne's 1960 epic, The Alamo, portrayed Crockett as a patriot ready to make the ultimate sacrifice. More recently, Billy Bob Thornton gave us a more nuanced version in the 2004 film of the same name. Across all these portrayals, he's brave, folksy, and heroic, the king of the wild frontier. But who was the real man behind this towering myth? Behind the Disney version, the real David Crockett was a much rougher, more ordinary, and in some ways more interesting figure. He was born on the 17th of August 1786 in what was then the edge of the American frontier in eastern Tennessee, into a big family that was often short on money and long on hard work. Schooling was patchy. Life was measured in chores, debt, hunger, and whatever you could hunt or grow. As a boy, he was hired out to help drive cattle, and when his employer tried to keep him longer than agreed, Crockett simply walked off and made his way home through winter conditions. Not long after, he ran away again, this time to avoid trouble after a school fight, and then spent years moving from job to job, learning the roads, the woods, and the way grown men talked and bargained. That early drift in years matter because they're where he gets the confidence and the survival skills that later become legend. When he finally settled, Crockett wasn't some born celebrity. He was a working man trying to build a life. He married young, tried farming, and became known locally as an exceptional hunter and a reliable hand in a tough place. But what really set him apart wasn't just shooting straight. It was that he could talk. Crockett had a natural gift for turning everyday hardship into a story people wanted to hear. On the frontier, stories were currency. They made you memorable. They made strangers trust you, and they made rooms go quiet. That's the seed of his later public image. He didn't invent the frontier tall tale tradition, but he learned to ride it like a wave, sometimes leaning into the humor, sometimes letting other people exaggerate him into something bigger than he was. And that's where the myth machine kicks in. Wild claims about Crockett, wading rivers like they were puddles, fighting animals barehanded, spread during his lifetime because America was hungry for symbols. The frontier was expanding, politics was loud and personal, and people loved a character who felt like the country in miniature, rough, funny, stubborn, self-made. Crockett often laughed off the most absurd stories, but he also understood something modern audiences understand too. Once a public image takes hold, it becomes a life of its own. That's why he eventually published an autobiography, partly to correct the record, partly to reclaim his own name, poking fun at the exaggerations while still presenting himself as the authentic article, a man from the woods who'd made it to the national stage. While he was definitely a crack shot, he couldn't actually do the impossible. The line between fact and fiction was blurry, and Crockett smartly used his frontier fame to launch a political career. He served in the Tennessee militia during the Creek War and later won a seat in the U.S. Congress. As a politician, he was known for being a plain-spoken champion of the common settler. But he was also a man of principle. He famously stood against President Andrew Jackson's Indian Removal Act of 1830, the policy that led to the tragic Trail of Tears. Okay, so the Indian Removal Act effectively gave President Andrew Jackson the legal power to push Native American peoples from their ancestral lands, in particular in the South, and relocated them west of the Mississippi to what became known as Indian Territory. In reality, it opened the door to forced removals, most infamously the Cherokee Trail of Tears, with widespread suffering and thousands of deaths. He was the only one from his state's delegation to vote against it. This move cost him politically. After losing his re-election bid, a frustrated Crockett supposedly told his constituents, "You may all go to hell, and I will go to Texas." Whether he actually said those exact words or not, they capture his fiery, independent spirit, and that's exactly what he did. He packed his rifle and headed for the volatile Texas frontier. When Crockett arrived in Texas in late 1835, he walked straight into a revolution. At the time, Texas was a part of Mexico, but Anglo-American settlers and local Tejanos were in open rebellion, fighting for independence. The political situation was a powder keg. Mexico's president, General Antonio López de Santa Anna, had seized power as a dictator and was determined to crush the uprising. He saw the influx of American frontiersmen like Crockett as a threat, suspecting the United States wanted to annex the territory. Santa Anna was not messing around. He marched a large army north, aiming to make a brutal example of the rebels. His orders were to show no quarter, no mercy. This was proven at the Alamo, where his army surrounded a small group of Texan defenders. It would be proven again just weeks later at Goliad, where he ordered the execution of over 340 surrendered Texan prisoners. Santa Anna's message was clear. Rebellion would be met with absolute force. It was into this firestorm that Davy Crockett stepped, pledging his support for Texas independence. In February 1836, Crockett and a small band of Tennessee riflemen arrived at the Alamo, an old mission in San Antonio. There, about 180 Texan rebels led by William B. Travis and James Bowie were preparing for a fight. They were badly outnumbered, and they knew it. Crockett, a former congressman, held no official command. He was just a private, but his fame and marksmanship were a huge boost to morale. On February 23rd, Santa Anna's army, thousands strong, surrounded the mission, beginning a 13-day siege. Inside, Crockett reportedly kept spirits up with his stories and humor. The defenders refused to surrender. According to legend, Travis drew a line in the sand with his sword, and all but one man crossed it, vowing to fight to the death. Whether that story is true or not, it captures their unwavering resolve. Before dawn on March 6, 1836, Santa Anna launched the final assault. Waves of Mexican soldiers stormed the walls. The defenders fought back with everything they had, but they were ultimately overwhelmed in brutal, close-quarters combat. By the end, all of the roughly 189 Texan defenders were dead. Davy Crockett, aged 49, died that day alongside his famous comrades. The Mexican army paid a steep price for their victory, with hundreds of casualties. Santa Anna had the bodies of the defenders burned without a proper burial. But instead of crushing the rebellion, the fall of the Alamo became a powerful rallying cry. Remember the Alamo! This sacrifice bought time for the main Texan army to regroup, leading to Santa Anna's defeat just weeks later. Crockett's death at the Alamo cemented his status as an American legend. But the question of exactly how he died is where the story gets really interesting. The legendary version, the one we've seen in movies and read in books for generations, is that Crockett died fighting heroically. He emptied his rifle, Old Betsy, and then used it as a club, swinging away until he was finally cut down by Mexican bayonets. This image of a defiant last stand became the cherished account, reinforced by countless paintings and films. John Wayne's movie even has him blowing up the powder magazine as a final act of defiance. For a long time, this was the accepted story. But then, in the 1950s, a controversial piece of evidence surfaced. A Mexican officer who fought at the Alamo, Lieutenant Colonel José Enrique de la Pena, had kept a diary. When his memoir was published, it told a very different story. According to de la Pena, Crockett didn't die during the battle. Instead, he was one of a handful of defenders who survived the initial fighting and were captured alive. These prisoners, including Crockett, were brought before General Santa Anna. Furious, Santa Anna ordered their immediate execution. The diary makes a note that Crockett and the others died bravely, refusing to beg for their lives. This account turned a century of Texas folklore on its head. Initially, many historians rejected the diary, claiming it was a forgery. The idea that their hero might have surrendered and been executed was hard to accept. But over the years, most scholars have come to believe that de la Pena diary is authentic. The consensus now is that Crockett was likely captured and then executed on Santa Anna's orders. It's a more somber ending, a hero defeated and mercy denied. But even in this version, Crockett's courage is undeniable. The truth might be that his final brave act wasn't swinging a rifle, but facing an execution squad with dignity. So let's ask a tantalizing question. What if Davy Crockett had survived? Imagine the smoke clearing on March 6th, and amidst the ruins, a wounded Crockett is found alive. What would have happened? Santa Anna might have paraded him in chains as a propaganda trophy. Or, if he'd somehow escaped, his survival could have become a powerful symbol for the Texan resistance. There are even wild legends that he slipped away and lived out his days in secret, but there's zero evidence for that. These ideas are fun for alternate history, but they're just fiction. All credible evidence points to one conclusion. Davy Crockett's story ended at the Alamo on March the 6th, 1836. Whether he fell in the heat of battle or faced an executioner's blade moments later, he died in service of the Texas cause. His sacrifice helped inspire a victory that changed the course of American history. From the halls of Congress to the dusty plains of Texas, his life straddles the line between reality and myth. And as we peel back the layers of legend, we find a man whose real story of principle, courage, and independence is just as compelling as any tall tale. For me, at least, this is the story of a man that put aside his celebrity status, joined shoulder to shoulder with ordinary men, and stood up and got himself counted. Okay, so I really appreciate you watching this. You've been watching the Midnight Investigator. If this interests you, please like and subscribe. We will be back for more investigations. In the meantime, question everything. Don't let someone else do your thinking.